So, there are places you drive through, and then there are places you get stuck in. I mean, most towns are the kind you don't even think twice about. Little highway blips where you might pick up gas or grab a coffee. Newbury, though, that place wasn't the usual. I'll tell you right off the bat, it wasn't right. Not from the moment I rolled into town. It was some time past 4 in the afternoon when I finally turned into the town. I hadn't planned to, not even close. I was driving home after visiting some old friends on the coast, and somehow, between the winding country roads and my GPS flaking out, I'd taken a wrong turn. Now, I wasn't exactly eager to be there. The sky was already looking like it wanted to drop the sun fast, and I had lots of miles left to go. But there I was, with the gas gauge nearly in the red. So yeah, I wasn't going anywhere without a pit stop. The sign, if you could even call it that, was a faded slab of wood with Newbury stenciled in crooked letters, barely hanging on to the edge of the road. Right below it, someone had scratched in a population count, 208. Probably wrong, if you asked me. Didn't seem like a place where anyone gets track. As I pulled down the main street, I felt it right away, like the whole place was watching me. I'd lived in small towns before, but this was different. It was the kind of quiet that makes you feel like you're stepping into someone else's dream. There were houses and storefronts lining the street, sure, but nothing moved. No people, no animals, no cars. The wind barely even blew. It was all just still. I slowed down near a dusty gas station with a faded sign above the door that read, Evans Gas and Goods. And across the road, a diner with an old-fashioned neon sign that just said, Eat. No other words, just that. Anyway, I figured I'd gas up, grab something to drink, maybe ask for directions, and get out of there as quickly as possible. As I got out of the car, the bell above the gas station door jingled, and a wiry man in his 60s stepped out, wiping his hands on a rag. He had a face like weathered leather, a look that told you he'd been here a long, long time. His eyes met mine, with that sort of look you get from someone who's tired of talking. But he came up to the pump without a word. "Fill her up?" he asked, not even a hint of friendliness in his voice. I nodded, reaching for my wallet. I didn't think this place would take cards, so I got out some cash. While he started pumping, I noticed a bulletin board on the gas station wall, with a single sheet of paper tacked to it, handwritten, in neat, old-fashioned cursive. Strangers are advised to leave before dark. Below that, in smaller writing, we mean it. I raised an eyebrow, glancing over at the old man. He caught me staring, didn't say anything, just wiped his hands and finished pumping gas. So naturally, I had to ask, "What's with the sign? Some kind of urban legend?" He just stared at me for a second, his eyes narrowing slightly. I could see him debating whether to answer. "It's not a legend," he said finally, his voice barely above a mumble. "Just a warning. We don't stay out after dark here, and we don't advise strangers to either." The way he said it, so matter of fact, made me incredibly nervous. I laughed a little, trying to shake it off. So what? Ghosts or something? Big bad monsters? He didn't laugh. He didn't even crack a smile. Not something for me to explain, he said. I just pumped gas. Not the answer I wanted, but he didn't look like he'd give me anything else. I paid him, thanked him, headed across the street to the diner. I don't know why. Maybe I thought someone else could clue me in on this weird town rule. Or maybe I just wanted a cup of coffee to wake myself up from whatever strange energy this place had thrown at me. Inside the diner, it was just as empty, with a flickering fluorescent light overhead and a faint smell of stale grease hanging in the air. A young waitress stood behind the counter, her hair tied back in a loose ponytail. She was wiping down the tables, and when she saw me, her face went a little pale. She looked at the clock, then back at me, almost like she was calculating something. "Just coffee?" she asked, not really waiting for my answer, as she grabbed a cup and filled it. She set it down in front of me and leaned forward, glancing out of the window, like she was expecting something to happen out there. "So, what's the deal here?" I asked. "The guy at the gas station said not to stick around after dark. You guys all in on some kind of prank? It's weeks until April Fool's Day." Her gaze didn't leave the window. "It's not a prank," she said, her voice low. "It's just town policy. People who don't leave by sundown usually don't leave at all." I didn't know how to respond to that, so I just sipped my coffee. I flipped through the tattered newspaper that someone had left on the table. Looking at the date, it had been there for weeks. Outside, the sky was starting to darken, casting long shadows down the street. I noticed that the few buildings I'd seen earlier were now locked up tight, windows shuttered, lights off. The whole place looked dead. "Look," she said, her voice breaking my thoughts. "I know you're just passing through, but you really need to leave. It's nearly 5 and—" She paused, her eyes widening slightly as she looked out of the window again. I followed her gaze and saw a man across the street, just standing there in the growing dark. He wore an old coat, and his hat cast a shadow over his face, but even from a distance, I could tell he wasn't looking at me. He was looking at the sky, his face upturned, like he was waiting for something. "Who's that?" I asked, my voice barely more than a whisper. She shook her head. "Just someone who didn't leave." I didn't want to press her, but her words made me uneasy. I glanced back, and the man was still there, standing perfectly still, like a statue, as the sky grew darker. The sun had just dipped below the horizon, and the streetlights hadn't come on yet. In fact, nothing in town had any lights on anymore. I finished my coffee, tossed a couple of bills on the counter, and thanked her, even though she didn't seem to notice. Her eyes were glued to the window, her body completely motionless, almost as if she was afraid to move. I turned to leave, but before I could reach the door, she grabbed my arm, her grip surprisingly strong. "Whatever you do, don't stop," she said, her voice barely a whisper. "Once you're out of town, don't look back. Don't slow down. Just keep going until you're miles away." I nodded. my heart pounding a little faster now, and stepped outside. The man across the street was gone, vanished, like he'd never been there at all. The streets were empty. The silence hit me like a freight train. I walked quickly back to my car, my footsteps echoing in the stillness, every sound amplified 100 times over. When I got into the car and turned the key, I felt a surge of relief as the engine came to life. I pulled out onto the main road, glancing back at the gas station and diner, both now completely dark, and headed towards the edge of town. As I drove, I couldn't shake the feeling that I wasn't alone. You know that unmistakable feeling you get when you know that someone is watching you. The road was pitch black. No streetlights, no cars. Nothing but the faint glow of my headlights, slicing through the blackness. And every few seconds, I had this nagging urge to look in my rearview mirror, to see if there was anyone behind me. But I didn't. I kept my eyes on the road, just like the waitress had told me. Gripping the steering wheel so tightly, my knuckles turned white. The trees on either side of the road seemed to close in, their branches reaching out like twisted fingers. Then, in my peripheral vision, I spotted something strange. A figure, standing at the side of the road. I could barely see it in the poor light levels, but it was definitely there. I fought the urge to slow down, to get a better look, but I remembered what she'd said. Don't stop. I pressed my foot down on the gas, speeding up as the figure faded into the distance behind me. My heart was racing now, my pulse pounding in my ears. I'd never felt this kind of fear before, this primal, gut-wrenching terror that made me feel like a hunted animal. But the figures kept appearing. Every mile or so, there'd be another one, standing by the side of the road, just barely visible in the edge of my headlights. Some were closer than others, some further away, but they were all the same. Silent, unmoving, watching. It took every ounce of willpower I had to keep driving, to keep my eyes forward and not look back. I told myself it was a trick of the light, or my mind playing games with me. But deep down, I knew it wasn't. Whatever these things were, they weren't figments of my imagination. Finally, after what felt like forever, I saw the lights of the next town up ahead. I'd never been so relieved in my life. I sped into town, my hands shaking on the wheel, and pulled into a gas station just off the main road. I parked, breathing heavily, my heart still beating a mile a minute, and looked around. No shadowy figures, no eerie silence. Just normal people going about their business, completely oblivious to the nightmare I'd just driven through. I got out of the car and went into the gas station, my legs shaking as I walked. The clerk behind the counter gave me a curious look, probably wondering why I looked so rattled, but I didn't care. I grabbed a bottle of water, paid for it, and went back to my car, still half expecting to see one of those figures standing outside. But there was nothing. I sat in the car for a while, trying to calm myself down, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had followed me from that cursed town. I eventually made it home, but I haven't been the same since. I can't drive at night anymore, not without feeling that same fear creeping up my spine, stalking me every minute of every day. And every now and then, when I'm driving alone, I swear I catch a glimpse of a figure standing by the side of the road, watching me from the shadows. I don't know what's going on in Newbury, but whatever it is, I'm never going back. That town has its own rules, its own way of doing things, and I don't ever want to see them again. But late at night, when I'm lying in bed, I sometimes hear a faint whisper in the back of my mind, telling me to come back, to stay just once until the sun sets, and for just a second, I think about it.